The Logitech G923 is one of the most popular racing wheels around, and it's one which is going to see a lot of game time in the new Forza Motorsport. Racing the latest Forza with a wheel really adds an extra sense of immersion and realism, and in this video I'm going to run through my recommended wheel settings for the Logitech G923 in Forza Motorsport. I'm going to start by quickly looking at the in-game assists, as these have a big impact on how your racing wheel feels. I'd recommend disabling as many assists as you feel comfortable with, but there is one change which is really important, and that is to change the steering sensitivity to simulation, as this will adjust how your racing wheel will feel pretty drastically. You can then choose whichever combination of ABS, traction control and stability control that you fancy. I'd recommend turning the traction and stability control off first, and then try to disable ABS, as the ABS is probably the trickiest assist to turn off, as the brakes can be pretty prone to locking up with certain cars. I'd always recommend using manual gears if you're racing with a wheel. Most racing wheels, including the Logitech G923, have paddle shifters built in, and this is another great way to increase the realism a touch. Once you've set the steering to simulation and adjusted your other assists, we can then move on to the button mapping. Now, the input settings should be your first stop after you have your assists sorted. Here you can set up your wheel's inputs and which buttons control various settings in game. I'd always recommend running through these settings with whatever wheel you're using, just to ensure your wheel is correctly registered. Go through and check the main settings such as your brake, your throttle pedal, as well as your shifters are all working correctly. You can simply scroll down to any setting and click on it to reassign your input. Then once all inputs are correct, head over to the advanced input settings to really start tinkering with your force feedback. The advanced input settings are where the real meat of your racing wheel settings are, and in here you can change the specifics of how your racing wheel behaves in every area, from its dead zone to the damping and force feedback. There are a ton of settings that you can change. So jumping into my advanced wheel settings, I'm going to go through my settings and show you them as quickly as I can while still giving a brief overview of some of the more important settings to change. Starting with the dead zone, ideally if your wheels and pedals are correctly configured, you should run all of these at 0 on the inside and 100 on the outside. This gives you the most realistic pedal travel and wheel rotation and the widest range to work with. For the vibration scale, I've got this set to 40 and the force feedback scale is set to 85. These can be seen as your overall strength of your force feedback. The self-alignment setting will provide a little bit of steering input to help keep your car stable, and it's kind of a global controller for both the mechanical trail scale and the pneumatic trail scale. I've set this to 75, which feels about right. And then the mechanical trail scale and the pneumatic trail scale affect how the force feedback comes through, especially when you're about to lose grip. These are two really important settings when you're racing with a wheel, and if you lower them both down to 0, for example, you'll get almost no force feedback at all. If you set them too high, so say and set the pneumatic scale up to 150, your wheel will really have a tendency to snap on you. I've got the mechanical trail scale set to 160, and then I've lowered the pneumatic scale to 30. If I increase the pneumatic scale anywhere near to 90, 80, 100, somewhere around there, the wheel will go incredibly light when you start to understeer. This can be helpful for some. Look at it as a little bit like an understeer assist from F123 or F122. I've then set the road feel scale to 120, which is your kind of global control of how detailed the track surface feels. If things are a little bit too noisy, you can turn this down a bit to sort of 90, 100. Then for the low sensitivity, I've gone with 40, damping scale to 95 to add a bit of weight into the wheel. The center spring scale is set to 60 and the dynamic damping behavior is 45. These all kind of work to increase your weight that is in the wheel and kind of the strength that it will return to center, that sort of thing. Finally, the steering sensitivity and linearity both adjust how your steering wheel feels as you turn it. Lowering the sensitivity will make your wheel rotate slower, closer to the center of the wheel and faster as you approach full lock. Leaving this and the linearity to 50 will give your wheel a true one-to-one linearity feel. A final note, if you're racing on PC, you can adjust some G-Hub settings. I've left most of them at default, which is the sensitivity and center spring strength both at 50, the torque set to 100 and the audio effects at 80. Now, while Forza Motorsport isn't a true simulator, these settings do help to make your Logitech G923 feel a bit more realistic and they allow the force feedback to really shine through. Let me know in the comments below how you find these settings, and if there's any settings that you're running that are slightly different to this. If you found this video useful in any way, hit that like button and subscribe for more Forza content. But for now guys, I will see you on track.